The frostbit wind howled through the streets of Maplewood, biting at 12-year-old Evelyn's cheeks as she trudged home from school. Her threadbare coat hung loose, and her shoes, held together by duct tape and hope, squelched in the slush. She'd spent lunchtime collecting cans again, her pockets jingling with meager coins. But as she cut through the affluent Cherry Hill neighborhood, a glint of gold in the snow stopped her cold. There, half buried near a polished black sedan, lay a delicate locket. Evelyn picked it up, her chapped fingers trembling. The pendant was warm, engraved with swirling vines, and a single word, Eleanor. Her stomach growled, warring with her conscience. This could buy groceries for weeks, or pay the heating bill Mom kept hiding. But before she could pocket it, a sharp voice sliced through the air. Put that down. A woman in a fur coat stormed down the driveway, her heels cracking like gunshots on the ice. Mrs. Whitaker, Maplewood's reclusive ice queen, whose steel-gray eyes could freeze a hurricane. Evelyn froze, the locket burning her palm. Thief, Mrs. Whitaker snarled, yanking the necklace. I should call the police. I wasn't stealing, Evelyn stammered, tears blurring her vision. I found it. I was gonna return it. The woman paused, studying Evelyn's frayed sleeves and red raw hands. Her scowl deepened. Likely story. You street kids are all the same. Evelyn's fists clenched. Street kid. She worked twice as hard as anyone at school. But as Mrs. Whitaker turned to leave, Evelyn blurted, Your locket's broken. The clasp dangled, cracked. Mrs. Whitaker stiffened. My dad was a jeweler, Evelyn mumbled. I can fix it, if you want. 10 minutes later, Evelyn sat at a marble kitchen island, surrounded by portraits of unsmiling ancestors. Her heart raced as Mrs. Whitaker slid a toolkit toward her. Prove it, the woman said, arms crossed. Evelyn's hands shook, but muscle memory took over. Dad had taught her this before the accident, before the bills swallowed everything. As she worked, Mrs. Whitaker's icy facade flickered. She hovered, clicking her tongue, until Evelyn snapped, Do you want me to mess up? A beat of silence. Then, shockingly, the woman chuckled. You've got spine, kid. What's your name? Evelyn. Eleanor, the woman replied, softer. But everyone calls me Mrs. Whitaker. By the time the locket clicked shut, Evelyn had spilled secrets she'd never told anyone. Mom's night shifts, the eviction notices, her baby brother's cough. Mrs. Whitaker listened, her sharp edges blurring. When Evelyn handed back the necklace, the woman cleared her throat. Wait here, she returned with an envelope fat with cash. For your services. Evelyn's heart sank. A transaction. Of course. But as she reached for it, Mrs. Whitaker grabbed her wrist. And this, she said, pressing a business card into Evelyn's palm. Eleanor Whitaker, family law attorney. Tell your mother to call me. That landlord of yours won't know what hit him. Weeks later, the Whitaker mansion felt less like a museum. Evelyn visited after school, fixing heirlooms while Mrs. Whitaker, Eleanor, ranted about insufferable clients. Slowly, the frost between them thawed. One afternoon, Eleanor muttered, My daughter would have liked you. Evelyn froze. Daughter? Clara, Eleanor said, staring at the locket. She ran away years ago, said I cared more about money than... Her voice cracked. I hired detectives, never found her. Evelyn's eyes widened. The locket's photo, a smiling girl with Evelyn's freckles and wild curls. You remind me of her, Eleanor whispered. Stubborn, kind, too kind for your own good. On Evelyn's 13th birthday, Eleanor arrived at their tiny apartment with a cake and a folder. Court papers, she said, avoiding Mom's tearful hug. The building's yours, paid in full. But the real gift came that night. As Evelyn opened Eleanor's card, a photo fluttered out. Clara, age 12, grinning in a sunflower field. On the back, in shaky script, "Thank you for finding me." Eleanor's last client had been herself, tracking Clara to a small town overseas. Reunited, they'd spent weeks healing. "Clara's coming home next month," Eleanor said, eyes glistening. "She'd like to meet you, if you'll allow an old woman to brag about her grand apprentice." The twist? Clara wasn't just Eleanor's daughter. Years ago, a young Eleanor had been Evelyn, poor, desperate, and saved by a stranger's kindness. The locket, a reminder to pay it forward. When Clara met Evelyn, she laughed. "Mom's been waiting decades to find someone worthy of her second chance." She winked. "Welcome to the family, sis. Wealth isn't wallets, but wounds healed and love passed on.